On July 18th, 2020, NASA launched a new vessel. 6 astronauts boarded Goliath-1 and set off to prepare the first human colony on the moon. The preparations were expected to take a year, but the vessel carried 6 months of additional food past the expectation in case of emergency. Radio communication was possible only on the side of the moon facing the Earth. The astronauts were told to stay in this area to maintain radio contact. The astronauts had landed on the eastern border of the Serengeti's. This lunar mare was largely covered in basalt and held few craters, making it perfect for colonization. The goal of the astronauts was simple: map the area for colonization and blueprint the construction of buildings. The only real danger on the moon was the meteor striking it, as the moon was devoid of any atmosphere. An electronic journal of the day's event was to be sent back to NASA, along with any interesting photos or videos, although it was to be seen if anything exciting could happen. It was the moon, after all. The first few months of journals were fairly normal. The astronauts were right on schedule with the predicted progress. They wasted no time to blueprint the area. Everything in a normal town was to be in the future town: a grocery store, a school, a hospital, among other things. Of course, these supplies would need to be sent by other vessels. It wasn't their mission to build anything. Then, on the 17th of September that year, the daily report had not come. It was speculated that it was forgotten, but didn't come the next day either. Radio communication was not successful with the astronauts and was only met with static. The radio tower was seen as working perfectly. It seemed that the astronauts were simply not within range of it. Several missing videos were later recovered from the site. The following is a description of each video. The astronauts were told to label their videos by date, using numbers following the date if more than one video was recorded that day. The first video was labeled appropriately as September 16th, 2020. It is around 10 minutes long and is mostly spent examining small craters near the border of the mare. Near the end of the video, the astronaut talks about hearing scratching noises from the crater, but this wasn't audible. The journal sent to NASA for the 16th of September did not mention this noise. The second video is also labeled appropriately as September 17th, 2020. This video was also focused around craters, specifically the nearby Bessel crater. This is an exceptionally large crater over 9 miles across and a mile deep. The plan was to eventually build a bridge across the crater. This video is roughly the same length of the previous video. The astronauts begin to make notes of the crater when the scratching sound is heard again. This time, however, it is quite audible and appears to be coming from the basin of the crater. The sound becomes so loud it begins to irritate the astronauts. One of the men looks down over the edge to find the source of the sound. A force unseen by the camera suddenly pulls the astronaut into the crater. His screams are heard briefly before the camera is cut short. The third and final video is labeled Code 7700, Please Help. The date is unknown, but it can be assumed it is probably the next day. It begins with an astronaut in an oxygen tent, talking to the camera. He explains in a calm voice that he has been unable to contact the radio. He also explains about how 2 of the astronauts have been horribly slaughtered. At this point, tears start to roll down his face, but he continues in a calm tone. The scratching noise from the previous videos is heard suddenly and sharply. The camera is knocked to an adjacent wall of the tent, and we listen to the astronauts pleading, followed by a heavy thump. The man continues to plead and cry out for help, stating that he can't breathe. The camera is completely turned away from the man, so it is not seen what is attacking him. We see blood beginning to splatter the adjacent wall. The man continues to scream for help and is now completely bawling. Blood splatters against the wall for a second time against the wall, alongside the sound of bones snapping and flesh being torn from them. His pleas for help suddenly stop and are just reduced to inane screaming and crying. As blood splatters against the wall again, a bit of brown liquid now mixes in with the bright red liquid. The tearing sound has since been replaced with that of squishing and sloshing. The only sound the man makes now is a quiet death rattle. Suddenly, the man goes silent, and several of his organs are tossed near the direction of the wall. Coincidentally, the night of September 18th was a red moon. None of the bodies of the astronauts from Goliath 1 were ever fully recovered. Colonization of the moon has been postponed until further notice. The team sent to investigate the radio communication problems the astronauts were having refused to talk to the public. Of the 4-man repair team, 2 have committed suicide since returning to Earth. While the 3 videos were recovered, a photograph was also recovered. It is still unknown as to what the photograph is. It was Chloe's favorite time of year again, fall. She loved the colors and fresh crisp air that came along with it. This year, the high school was doing a haunted hayride out at Miller's Field. The land hadn't been used in ages, and the county had taken it over. Mr. Bishop, the school principal, had gotten permission to do the hayride in the back end of the field, and Mr. Jensen, the school janitor, had offered to be the driver. It seemed everything was falling into place until Mrs. Jensen started complaining about the location. You see, the land had bad history. It wasn't good. At one time, Miller's Field had been the location of a farmstead and what seemed to be the happy home of the Miller family. The family consisted of Mr. and Mrs. Miller and their 2 sons. The sons worked the farm every day alongside their father, planting and harvesting corn. One day, while delivering a package, the mailman smelled a horrible smell. He called the sheriff and a couple deputies came out to check it out. What they found sent a shiver up their spines. Mr. and Mrs. Miller was found on the sofa with their throats slit so deep they were almost decapitated. The older son was found in the kitchen, completely gutted, laid back on the kitchen table. They searched for the younger son, but there was no trace of him. Only a blood trail that led to the barn. They expected to find another gruesome sight in the barn, but it was empty. The blood trail they were following stopped at the door. The property had been vacant for years, and finally, the county cleared the property and demolished the house and barn. No one had been on the site in ages, until now. Mr. Bishop had recruited a few of the football team to start setting up for the haunted hayride. Miss Amesley, head of the drama department, was supplying the props. Finally came the night for the hayride. The first group loaded up in the wagon with Mr. Jensen, ready for the drive. Chloe was running a bit late to get there in time for the first run, but she made it just in time for the second. With the wagon loaded up, they were ready to go. Jason, one of the football players that set up, said to Mark, "Do you remember that scarecrow?" "I don't remember a scarecrow in the props," Mark replied. "Me either, but it does look scary as hell." They were approaching the final turn of the backfield when they noticed another scarecrow. This one was even creepier. It looked like it was drenched in blood. It had a machete in its hand. "Did you see that? It looked like its head turned," said Jason. "Don't punk out, man. It's probably someone in a suit that Miss Amesley planned to scare everyone," Mark said. They were coming closer to the scarecrow as they rounded the turn. All of a sudden, it jumped off its post and started towards the wagon. Without skipping a beat, it jumped onto the wagon and started slaughtering the teens. Heads and limbs were lopped off in one swing. Mr. Jensen tried to jump from the tractor, but he didn't have a chance. When the wagon didn't return from the second run, Miss Amesley started to get concerned. Sheriff Ambrose was there with his family to get on the third run of the hayride.
"Sheriff, I'm beginning to get worried. They should have been back about 20 minutes ago,"
said Miss Amesley. "I can take a run out there to check. Jensen might have trouble with that old tractor," said Ambrose. What Ambrose found made his blood run cold. He saw the wagon just sitting in the back field, but he didn't see anyone in it. It looked empty from a distance. As he got closer, he started seeing body pieces. The backfield was the site of a massive slaughter. Heads, arms, legs, everywhere. The sheriff jumped back in his truck and called for backup. They roped off the backfield and searched for any evidence of a suspect, but to no avail. Miller's field sits empty again till this day. A suspect was never found, nor a weapon. No one goes to Miller's field. They don't even like passing by. There have been reports of weird-looking scarecrows in the field, but no one will enter to investigate. Don't enter Miller's field. Don't get too curious.
This is a story I heard from my friend Kay at a university. A man got whiplash in a car accident and decided to convalesce at home for a week. Kay was married, but his wife was also working, so he was all alone during the day. For the first few days, he enjoyed the freedom, but when the third day came, boredom began to set in. Still, he had to stay in because of his injury. Then one day, past lunchtime, he was watching TV absent-mindedly when he heard heavy stamping noises and children's voices from upstairs. He didn't pay much attention to it, although he wondered if they were on a school holiday. The next day began, and again he heard the same children's voices around the same time as the previous day. It sounded like there were two children up there. The place where Kay lived was a large apartment block, but in spite of that, it tended to be very quiet during the day. The children's voices, therefore, echoed loudly in contrast to the quietness of the surrounding. Kay, however, did not feel annoyed, but was rather glad of the distraction and a break it gave him from the eerie silence. The next day, Kay, feeling bored and not motivated enough to cook lunch, ordered some pizza. The pizza, which arrived within 30 minutes, turned out to be too much for Kay that he left one whole pizza untouched. Usually, he would keep any leftovers for his wife, but this time, he remembered about the children upstairs and, willing to do something kind, he decided to take the pizza to them. Kay had no idea who the occupants of the room upstairs were, but rang the bell on the door anyway. He heard something stir inside, but there was no answer. He rang the bell again. He felt someone was looking at him through the peephole. "Who is it?" a faint voice called out from behind the door. Kay explained he was from the room below and that he had some pizza left over from his lunch and wondered if they wanted it. The door opened a crack. It looked unusually dark inside the room. From the gap, about 5 centimeters wide, a woman appeared, revealing only half of her face. "Thank you very much, but we don't want it," the woman said coldly. It was a little too dark to discern her facial expression. Kay suddenly felt he was somehow out of place, like he shouldn't be there. However, he tried to explain to her that he wanted her to give the pizza to the children. A lukewarm air breezed out of the door. He smelt an unpleasant odor. In an instant, 2 children's faces lined up below the woman's face. The door was open still, just a crack. The dull eyes of the children stared at him. The 3 faces were forming a line. "I see. Then I will accept your kindness," the woman said. When Kay put the pizza box through the gap, a hand reached out right from the side and snatched it away. The 3 faces were still staring at Kay. "Thank you," he heard the faint voice again. Kay quickly left the place. He felt spooked. In the corner of his mind, he sensed something was seriously wrong. The image of the children's faces had left a burning impression in his mind. Faces. He felt a chill down his spine. Faces? They were forming a line. His pace quickened. He wanted to get away as fast as he could. He waited for the lift, but it would not arrive. Forming a line, vertically, on top of each other, he pressed the button again and again, but the lift still did not come. He turned to the emergency stairs. His head throbbed with pain. He began to feel nausea. Just as he opened the heavy door leading to the emergency stairs, he felt eyes on his back. Turning around, he glimpsed, about 10 meters from him, the same 3 faces looking at him from the corner of the corridor, like before. They were showing only half of their faces and staring at him with their dull eyes. The cold daylight shining through the windows illuminated their faces. No longer caring about his neck, he frantically ran down the stairs. Although the health-conscious K often used the stairs instead of the lift and could even run up 4 floors in one go, he felt as if no matter how fast he ran, he would never reach the ground floor. Faces lined up, on top of each other. That's impossible. That means there are no bodies. And the strange things I saw behind the faces were hands holding up their heads. He ran into the nearest convenience store and asked people to call the police. The police came and searched the flat and found the bodies of the mother and children in a bathtub. These bodies were headless. According to their findings, it had been 3 days since the heads had been chopped off the bodies. And the husband, who turned out to be the murderer, was found hiding in the wardrobe insane. He insisted his family was still alive. There was a terror in his eyes. The police did not know the source of his terror, though.
I love to go hiking. I go with my 3-year-old German Shepherd and let her go unleashed since we like to go to secluded places. Now I have been hiking all over the Utah mountains and wanted a new hike that wasn't too far from me. I have an app that tells me about the hikes near me, if it's a hard hike, reviews, and if it's dog friendly. Now I was scrolling through all trail looking for possibly something new, but I wasn't too hopeful. But to my delight, there was something new. I don't know why I don't remember the name of it, but I do remember it was at the bottom of the list, and it had one review saying, good. I thought that was kind of strange, mostly because people love to review hikes and they try to tell the city what they can do to improve the hike and make it more safe. But I figured it wasn't a popular hike. So the next day, Kyrie and I packed up our stuff and went up towards the hike. I always carry a first aid kit with extra food, a knife, and just emergency stuff in case I get lost. It's important to mention now that Kyrie eats a raw diet, meaning she eats raw meat, not cooked. Since we were going so early in the morning, I thought I could bring some with us. I put it in her blue backpack that I make her wear and decided when it got warmer, we would stop to eat. Where I live, there's a long drive, the canyon, and many roads going towards the hike you'd like to go on. This one was a little further than I'm used to, but I didn't care as it was new and I was excited. So was Kyrie. She cries in the car until we get there. Now I was following the directions on my phone and saw that it led me towards a thin road that was hidden. No wonder I haven't heard of this place. It was so hidden and so far up in the mountain. The road only fit one car, so the whole time I was so anxious that another car would come down and how I would handle that, but there never was. I never saw another car. When I got to the parking lot, if I could call it that, I noticed there was only space for like 3 cars, all in a tight space. It was so small, so I decided to park my car with the front facing towards the road. I thought maybe it was private property. Checked the app, but it didn't say anything about private property. So I shrugged it off. I got Kyrie out, prepared us, and we saw the trail. Now, even though I knew there wasn't anyone parked there, I kept Kyrie on a leash. I didn't know if there were bikers along the trail, but after 30 minutes or so, I didn't see anyone, so I decided to let her off the leash. It was a steep hike for the first half, but it was beautiful. We were deep in the woods and I felt at peace. I used to wear headphones when I hiked, but didn't anymore, so I was enjoying the natural sounds of the forest. It was still early in the morning, so I wore a light jacket and decided when it got warmer, I'd give Kyrie her breakfast. Now before you start to hate, I know, bringing Kyrie's raw meat was absolutely stupid and ignorant of me. I had never seen a bear or wolf or anything, so I got cocky and just thought it was okay. I learned my lesson the bad way on that day, so no need to tell me I was dumb. But honestly, I wouldn't blame you if you commented that. Now here's where we begin the bad part of the story. The trail finally stopped being steep and sort of an easy hike from here. When you got to the top, you could see through the trees, a beautiful open meadow. On the other side of it, you can hear a river and a waterfall. The trail went down and around the meadow. The meadow was absolutely beautiful with the mountains in the background, the sound of the water. This hike was almost the most beautiful one I had ever been to. When Kyrie and I were sort of in the middle of the meadow, she stopped right in front of me and looked towards the middle. Kyrie always walked ahead of me, and when she stopped, I stopped, since I trusted her judgment. Before I could look, the smell hit me first. You know, the typical rotting smell, but oh my God. Words cannot explain how bad it stank. It burned my nose and started to make me tear up. I put my shirt over my nose, feeling nauseous, and looked over to where Kyrie was looking. In the middle of a meadow was a deer. Now, I've only seen does before, but never a male deer in person. But his antlers were huge. Have you ever seen Princess Mononoke? When he sees the deer spirit walking across the water, and how big his antlers were. Almost like that. The beauty of the deer was amazing, but not enough to take away the disgusting smell that was making me sick. The deer was looking towards the mountains and away from me. I thought maybe Kyrie's food was going bad. I checked that, and it seemed fine. When I looked up again, the deer was looking towards our direction. I noticed that Kyrie's hackles went up after that. She started to cry nervously. Now, I've heard of wendigos and skinwalkers. I am a Native American. It is common for these creatures to be in our childhood stories. That and also listening to scary stories on YouTube. Now, when Kyrie did that, I got a bad feeling in my stomach, despite the sickness. It was a wendigo, and I knew that. And I didn't know what to do. These creatures were only a part of my stories to make me go to bed, not 2 instructions of what to do. Plus, my grandmother was the one with the stories and passed away. She was the one with the experience, not my mom or anyone else. I glanced at Kyrie again. When she cried and looked back towards the creature, it started to stand on its hind legs. Holy hell. It was fucking tall, and it faced my direction. It started to walk towards me. I was going to run until I heard it in my head. I am the one of this land. Suddenly, it started to run towards me full speed. I screamed, called Kyrie, and started to run. Kyrie was following behind me. I started to cry as I was running, since I could hear it catch up to me. It was loud. It was destroying everything it came in contact with, just to get to me. The adrenaline running through me was making me just focus on running. I didn't know where to go. I just ran. The trail suddenly got smaller, and bushes with thorns started to appear, but I didn't feel them as they cut my arms. As I heard it get closer, it suddenly went to the left as I ran straight. I somehow had the balls to look back to see if it was gone, but to also see Kyrie. Kyrie, I said, but right as I called out for her, the trail ended with a foot drop onto a patch of rocks. I hit my head, bleeding a bit, but again I couldn't feel it that much and just got up. I looked towards the forest when I suddenly heard a loud cry from my right. It was Kyrie. Kyrie! I cried out. I stood up crying and lost at what to do. I looked back to see a river leading up to the waterfall I heard. Suddenly a heavy weight ran into me and we both fell back. I hit my head again on the back and looked up to see Kyrie. Kyrie had blood all over her. It was pouring from her neck. Kyrie! I cried out. She was whimpering and breathing heavy. She still had her backpack on with some cuts in it. Before I had a chance to help her, a scream came from the forest. I looked back at the waterfall and somehow had the strength to pick up my 85-pound dog and carry her. I don't know where I was planning to go. I was just running to the waterfall as if it was a safe place. I was almost there when I heard the creature land on the rocks that I did earlier. I tripped at that and looked back to see it. Looking right at me, its eyes were black. Or I think so. It could also be that there wasn't anything in there. I don't know. I took off Kyrie's backpack and threw it towards the monster, hoping it would take the meat and just leave us alone. I was scooting back towards the waterfall, crying as I did so. Holding and dragging Kyrie with my left arm, I found that being so close to the creature made me literally weak to my knees. It walked over to me, taking huge steps. It looked so different than before. Before it looked like a deer, and now as it crawled over to me, it looked like a monster. I don't know how else to describe this awful demon. I don't. I'm sorry. But I felt water hit my head hard as I had reached the waterfall. I kept going until I was up against the wall. There was barely enough space where water wasn't hitting Kyrie and its faces. Kyrie felt limp at this point. I could somewhat see the creature through the water, but still saw it coming towards me. It stood on its hind legs. When it was close enough to me, watching me, the smell was so disgusting. I couldn't help but throw up in my mouth. It reached his arms out to grab me. I screamed so loud, I actually lost my voice. After I let out that scream, another scream came from deep in the forest. The creature snapped its head almost completely backwards, looking towards the scream. The scream sounded like the one this one had let out earlier. I was still holding on to Kyrie, crying and screaming, since its arm was so close. It looked back to me, pulling its arm away, and again said in my mind, "I am the one of this land." With that, it took steps back, watching me, and went down the riverbank. It crawled on all fours, stopping next to Kyrie's backpack. It ripped it apart and pulled out the meat, eating it with the plastic bag that it was in. It suddenly screamed and ran towards the direction of the scream from earlier. When I thought it was gone, I stood up shakily and carried Kyrie towards the trail again. When I was running, I came across to my backpack that I had left earlier and stopped. It was ripped apart, so I took off my jacket and wrapped it around Kyrie's neck, where she was bleeding a whole lot. After that, I barely remember. All I remember is carrying Kyrie and driving down, screaming the whole way towards the emergency vet. They asked us what happened, and I told them it was a bear. They called the ambulance since I had blood all over me and they couldn't tell if it was mine or Kyrie's. Kyrie made it through surgery and had to have some stitches on her, along with a pad. It didn't really heal, and a huge bump grew on there. It had been infected, but eventually got better. She also had a bite mark on the top of her left eye, but that healed much better. They pulled out a 4-inch tooth. I don't have it because I couldn't even look at it, but they declared it from a bear, even though they said it looked weird. While I was waiting for Kyrie, I went to look up the trail on the app and it was gone. I don't know why or how, but it is. I don't remember where it is either. That's all a blur. I have some pictures of Kyrie. The one with my niece is a hike that my mom and her took. It had been weeks after, and my mom thought to try and help her through it. Kyrie looks nervous in the picture, but you could see the huge bump on the left side of her neck. There's also a picture with Kyrie and her bandages around her neck. And the one that is the most recent of her neck, it's black. The stitches came out. The last picture is up the top of her head, also black, but it's healed now. I'll have pictures of these, but don't know where or how to post them. I haven't been hiking since, and I refuse to let Kyrie go. That time my mom took her, she did it while I was at work, but she regretted doing it because she said Kyrie was crying and was so scared they just had to go home. My mom knows. I screamed at night from nightmares for a week or two. My mom put white candles in my room to get rid of the bad spirits that was attracted to my negativity. So yeah, here's my story. A I've heard stories where people saw Wendigo and they didn't get harmed. And God, I wish I went through that. I hate hiking. My therapist thinks I may have some PTSD, but only knows of it as a bear. I'm getting through it. Kyrie is too. Hopefully one day I can go back, but I don't see that being for a while. Please, if you're going to go up to the mountains, please prepare. Mother Nature is not only unpredictable, but has things in there that just don't make sense in our heads. So please be safe. I say that with the most serious sincerity.